I'm trying a new tech, so hopefully this works out, y'all. This is leadership after hours. In this session or this conversation, I'm going to be both sharing a story about what does it look like to be a leader that's a human being that has real frustrations and challenges, and sometimes that can show up in how you hold people accountable. And then I want to teach you a method that I use to self regulate, to literally help myself go from being more of a hothead to being able to share the problems my team's experiencing, hold my team member accountable, give them space to listen and grow, to not create a threatening or psychologically unsafe place, and end the conversation with a clear understanding about what went well, what went wrong, and at least one strategy for how we can get things on track. So, my name is Krista Wilson. I am the founder and CEO of Wilson and Associates Coaching and Consulting, and I have been doing work around leadership development, culture transformation, psychological safety, and coaching for 17 years in my agency. And I'm so glad to be sharing this with you. So here's the short of it. If you did not see the message or see any of the content I put out before, so I'm going to be referencing this phone. So I basically shared a story maybe 2 days ago, and in that story, I shared, and I'll just share it here. I had a high pressure, high stakes moment in my business when a team member went MIA, y'all, missing in action for 90 minutes before a critical deadline. So imagine you've got a critical deadline. There are a dozen people looking to you to finish this thing, and a team member who has the missing pieces to finish this package cannot be reached. Not on phone, not on email, not on Slack, not on our project management tool. And so I had a surge of energy that's very human. I was kind of peed off. Like, where is this person? 2 hours ago we said we would reconvene at this point in time, and I couldn't find them. I was worried that we were going to miss the deadline, and I had fear about what it could mean to mess up this big. There's some high stakes involved, and so if you know anything about conflict, what you know, and really tension. Sometimes the C word is one that people don't resonate with, but in those instances where there's high stakes, there's high emotions, it is the spark to create tension and to emotionally lash out. And as a leader, that is not how I want to show up. I don't want to eat my feelings and suppress them and pretend that everything's fine when it wasn't. And I also want to be mindful of how my emotions land on somebody else. So this is what I shared in the original post. I shared that I went through this process of having to almost map out everything that's happened, everything that needs to happen, and most importantly, what needs to happen right now so that we meet this deadline. Right, we meet this deadline, and the pieces get put together to the best that I can do it on my own. So, long story short, I start putting the package together. Things weren't where they were supposed to be. So that was another thing that really triggered and activated me. But I did reach out and found my team member. We were able to connect, and it was the most intense, stressful 40 minutes to get this package together. But we got it together and we got it out with, I think, 2 or 3 minutes to spare. And so here's what happened in that situation. I wanted to address everything that had led up to this moment. And I wanted to name that it was serious, the issues that we had, right? Some documents weren't properly prepared, files were not where they were supposed to be saved, they were essentially missing, not being able to contact a member of the team in a critical time point. All of these things we've got to course correct so that these kinds of hiccups don't happen again, and particularly they do not happen while we're working together, while we're trying to hit these deadlines. And so my first focus was we've got to get the package out. My second thing was, okay, when I have this conversation with this team member, how do I want to show up? Do I want to show up guns blazing, yelling, frenetic, hectic, uh, and likely to create harm? Is that how I want to lead? Or do I want to lead in a different way? Do I want to express any of my feelings? Do I want to just talk about, the facts of the case? My head is spinning around all of the different, let's call them lanes that the conversation could go down. And so what I ended up doing was a practice that I named it for me because I tell my clients when I'm doing conflict resiliency training, I am a reformed hothead. I come from a family that is very expressive, but also arguing and debating and getting the last word in and always being right is part of the culture in my family. And that can make for riveting family reunions and Uno games, but it can not be appropriate for the workplace. And so when I became a certified coach in 2014, I learned that I need to get a better handle of my emotions and the impact that my words and actions have on other people, and to not be so hard and roughed edge, but find a way to soften, not minimize, not withhold, not be fake, but how to be more care rich, like lead with care and careful with my words and my actions. And that led me to create a process that I call SOFT. It's an acronym. So I can, when there's so much to do, there's high stakes, there's strong emotions, there's frustration and disappointment, and the people management part of all this too. I come back to SOFT to think about how I want to regulate my emotions so that they don't dysregulate somebody else, and I want to figure out how to set the stage for a conversation of accountability. So that's what I'm going to show right now. So I mentioned S is an acronym, and my whiteboard is not working right now. But what I'll do is I will share a piece that I shared on LinkedIn just to show the screen. Okay. So the first thing when I talk about soft, this is the emotional management component of this framework. So a lot of the time you will hear people talk about, empathy or emotional intelligence, all these kind of uh, big, concepts. But essentially, what emotional intelligence is, or the kind of critical components of it, it's first being aware of your emotions. That's a first really critical part. What am I feeling? So in the soft method, I'm going through, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? So I was feeling angered, and I was feeling disappointed, I was feeling frustrated, I was feeling really not heard, which is a big trigger for me because I thought we had a game plan and that game plan wasn't being followed. So the S of the soft method is to slow the surge. If you could imagine that you are on an elevator at the ground floor, and as you're on that elevator, normally you go to the first floor, then the second floor, then the third. You slowly move up the elevator in a very gradual, regimented way. When we are in an activated or triggered space that comes from all those feelings that I mentioned, disappointment, frustration, anger, etc., our elevator goes from the ground floor and it rushes up to the 21st floor. I mean, it just goes straight all the way up. We're not in control. We're not mindful of how we got to floor 20. We're just instantly there. That's how lashing out often looks like, particularly in leadership, right? We might suppress, we might hold back, and then something happens, and boom, we're instantly at that 20th floor. So, part of what I have to do is I've got to slow that surge. And the way that I slow that surge is, first, I do a somatic practice. So, in our organizational culture change strategy here at the firm, we talk about how do you lead culture transformation. And the fourth step of that is embodied. And I could do a whole other video on embodiment, but essentially, when we are frustrated, angry, disappointed, all of these emotions that are heavy, we are often at the same time disembodied, meaning that we are not um, really in control of our emotions. We might not be aware of our breathing. We might feel out of sorts, all kinds of euphemisms for this idea about being dysregulated. So I know before I can finish the project, before I can, uh, have a conversation with my team member, I have got to get my emotions in control, and I've got to reset my nervous system. And so, how I and many others will do that are different practices like physical practice or somatics. So, in this instance, I actually cut my monitor off, I pulled the chair back, and I did 5 minutes of breathing. And that felt like a luxury because we were on a deadline. But I was like, I'm going to blow a gasket, and I'm going to hurt my team members' feelings with the words and the actions that I want to say right now. And so I just took a pause and I got grounded in my chair with my feet planted, sitting up, and noticed that I was breathing very shallow, like short, shallow breaths, which are not energizing breaths. Let it out. And then I did it again. And then my backup practice is I pet my dog because he's very cute and it helps to, ground me with that. Now, your somatic practice to just change the energy could be going outside. It could be having a cold or a warm glass of water. It could be listening to music for 2, 3 minutes. But if you want to stop that emotional surge, you've got to get grounded. And in the field of positive intelligence, they call these things PQ reps. They're your like you would do a arm bicep curls at the gym. Your PQ rep is your emotional intelligence practice to get in touch with your senses. So that's what slow the surge is. Connect with your senses to redistribute that energy so that you can be more productive and focused. So that's the the S. Excuse me. Okay. So the next is the O. So once I had that breathing and I could get a little bit more perspective on the situation, I realized, okay, here's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to lead my team through the challenging project at hand, and I'm going to have a conversation with them. And sometimes I can, even me, the person who created the Certified Conflict Resilient Leader program, I can be a little conflict averse sometimes, especially when I don't want to hurt people's feelings. And so I had to check in with what are my leadership values and how can I orient myself to those. Why that's important is it means when I orient to my values, which is I want people to feel cared for. I want them to be heard. I want people to hold themselves accountable to the agreements that we made with each other. And I want to be clear, and I want people to feel that they have the opportunity to express themselves in a way that they're also understood. So I was floating these values, and as I was orienting to them, it told me what my tone needed to be, how I energetically needed to show up. And so, an activity for any leader is for you to map out what are your 3 to 5 leadership values. When it comes to managing people, what do you most care about and what matters? When you map that out, it should give you a pretty clear checklist about how you should speak to folks, or your tone, your word choice, your timing, and your actions, right? How do you treat people, even in conversations that are tense? So I oriented it to my values. That's the S of the S.O.F.T method. So once I did that, right, uh, it helped shape getting this package completed and getting it submitted. But now I had to have that conversation. And so before I engage in the conversation with my team member about essentially a postmortem, what happened? How did we get here? How did we not make it happen again? I wanted to get to the facts. Oftentimes, when we are triggered, we're let down by others, we feel frustrated. We start to create backstories about that other person, and sometimes, maybe not you, but leaders that I have coached, what we have discovered is that oftentimes when folks make a mistake, right? They don't do what they said they would. They're late. There was a low quality delivery. We don't just look at the fact of that delivery was late. We start to ascribe the fact as a character flaw. In other words, this document is late because the employee is lazy. The quality was poor because this is not a smart person, right? We start to assign these really harmful, often biased assumptions about people's character based on the facts that we've seen. So for me, I created the F of the S.O.F.T method, which is really a two-part practice. The first part is you want to really find the facts. So what happened? What were the observable facts? Not you saw the documents were misfiled and then you developed meaning around it. You added a story around the fact. Instead, just start listing what were the facts. So my facts were I couldn't reach the team member. I tried on 4 different platforms. I didn't hear for an hour. The documents weren't filed properly. There were errors in the final version of the documents. These are all facts. These are undebatable, like non-debatable facts. Anybody could look at our materials and see this is a fact. The next part is when you notice that you're feeling disappointed, you are feeling let down, all the emotions that came up that tell you you have to hold someone accountable. I say take those facts that you just found and you want to map where there was misalignment. So here's what that looked like for me. We had a conversation in the morning where we said we would reconvene at a particular time. I checked for understanding. Is that clear? Talking about, 12 o'clock Pacific. All right, we're good. That was our shared agreement. So when the person didn't show up at our agreed upon time and they were unreachable, first, I want to make sure there was no crisis. So the first message I said, hey, I want to make sure you're okay. I do give people grace. But then when I didn't hear anything, I thought, okay, what is going on? Could there have been a crisis? Could there be a reason why they're missing? And then I could see though the file time change on our shared folder. So I knew they were working, they just weren't available. And so it was really frustrating me. So I said mapping this misalignment looks like this. We agreed at meeting at this time. You did not meet me at this time, and for an hour and 10 or so minutes, you were MIA. So we were not aligned on time and how we would communicate. That's factual. What I have found is that giving feedback is often challenging because we don't want to hurt people's feeling. And for many of the managers that I have coached and I have done training with, they've shared that the reason that they hold back on feedback is that they don't want to be the kind of boss that is mean, right? Is disrespectful or creates a sense of fear among their team members. But that worry prevents them from actually managing people and performance. So what I say is go into it with facts. What did you see? And you can also say here's the meaning that I'm making around it, but be very clear about the facts that you saw. And what I have found is when I've done this with team members, I've coached folks around this, the recipient of the feedback, it makes it easier to take. I'm not saying it's easy, but it makes it easier to take because it was objective. It was the things you could see that, there's timestamps, you could look at the file and see the font sizes are different, or that there's typos. That's a fact. You could see that. And then you can talk about how to make sure that misalignment doesn't happen again. And then it comes to you also asking them what their understanding was. What was their understanding about what happened, and asking them to also share their results of finding the facts. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes this work requires that we as leaders hold folks accountable, but it also looks like we have to hold ourselves accountable too. I always say my metaphor is that sometimes there's stuff that I got to eat. That's mine to hold. So I'll give you an example. In part of the package, my team member decided to compile the documents in a way that I've never seen it done that way before. Doesn't mean that no one ever has done it that way. I just haven't seen it before. And the way that it was compiled, by copying and pasting, screenshotting images and dropping it into a document, it meant that there was lots of distortion. I never talked to my team member and said, for these 30 attachments, here's how they should be prepared and here's how they should be assembled. I got to eat that. I can't be mad that my team member didn't uh, compile materials the way that I wanted if I never communicated my expectations, one. And two, I didn't check their understanding about what my expectations are. So I told my team member, I can't hold you accountable for this when I never specifically and explicitly asked you to do it in this way. So that's mine to eat. And moving forward, I will be better about communicating the things that matter. Right? Sometimes it doesn't matter how stuff gets put together, but sometimes it does. So in the moments where it does matter, I will be explicit, check for understanding, and get you the resources that you need. If you need I don't know technology, but if you need like some kind of a souped up Adobe Acrobat PDF Ripper. I don't know. You tell me, and I will buy it so that you have what you need. All right, so that's the find your facts. And what's important is if you take nothing else away, do not fill in the information gaps with your backstory. Don't look at a fact and then interpret what it means because that's still an assumption. We got to ask folks, how did we get here? And that takes me to the T. The T of the S.O.F.T method is one that I have found increasingly that my clients don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable. It's a lot, my best friend would say, breezy. If you could just send a text or a Slack message or a message on Google Meet, just can I write it? Can I write it? Can I send an email? And I say, depends, right? It does depend. I know I've sent correction messages on Slack because of time zone difference, urgency, couldn't reach the person. I was traveling. It just made it easier to send it. And then I followed up with a voice note. And then we were meeting within 2 days. I could dig into it deeper there. But generally, you can't hold people accountable, which includes sharing the facts, naming the misalignment, asking their perspective, and then creating a correction plan. You can't do that without having a conversation. We have to talk to each other, even though that feels challenging. So the T in the S.O.F.T method for emotionally intelligent accountability is to talk to transform. And specifically, you want to talk to transform, but do it in a way that's still rooted in care, or what we call loving accountability. So loving accountability is my reframe because this was, gosh, 14 years ago. I worked on the project and we were talking about how to hold ourselves and how to hold our employees accountable and how they can hold managers accountable as well. And a lot of people hear the word accountable and it lands on them as punishment. Here's the thing: as leaders, we are trying to manage and we're trying to hold people accountable and we're trying to execute A, B, C, and D. But we do it in a dominant culture in the United States and in many Western countries where a culture of blame and a punitive culture is the norm. So when we think about holding someone accountable, sometimes it does mean punishment. If you think about it, the way that you approach accountability might be like, I'm going to get them. I'm going to show them why they messed up. They're in trouble. That's a very carceral, punitive way that many of us have been acculturated to think about accountability. So I talk about loving accountability, which is how can you have correction, yes, but care at the center of the correction. So I'm offering you this feedback so that you can become aligned to the expectations for you in this role. I'm not trying to hold you accountable to knock you down a peg, to make you feel insignificant, to rub your nose in your mistake. That's not accountability. Well, let me say it differently. In some places, that is what accountability looks like. But for people first leaders and people first cultures, accountability's got to be totally reimagined to have care at the center. So here's what I've done to help me talk to folks in a way that's transformative and rooted in loving accountability. First thing I do is I know that as a human being, I enter these accountability conversations with a energy of judgment. You messed up, you were wrong, I'm not liking you in this moment, you messed up, you could have ruined the whole thing, right? You're a bad person or a bad worker. These are the subconscious, negative thoughts that are in all of us. I'm just trying to keep it real with you, again, as a reformed hothead. So the practice becomes, how do you begin these conversations not from the seat of judgment, but do it from the seat of curiosity? So when I'm doing a keynote or I'm training, I am often talking with my clients about how do you suspend judgment and get curious. And I use this metaphor. If you are seeing, let's say, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You cannot, on the one brain, wonder if it's good, what how soft the bread is, if it's going to be really like satiating, and you concurrently think, I bet the bread's dry. I bet there's not enough jelly. Doesn't look right. It's hard to hold curiosity and openness and possibilities while concurrently being judgmental and critical. It's really hard to do both. You will typically lean to the critical judgment side. So when you're starting these conversations about trust, about accountability, do it from the seat of curiosity. What that looks like in practice is this. How did you experience this thing? Uh, what's your perspective on how we got here? You know, what was missing this time around that we could put in place the next time? And notice that my questions are what we call open questions. These aren't questions like that have a yes or no answer. They're questions that open up someone to share their thinking, their perspective. And we want open questions in this part of the talk. Now, the next thing that I say is you want to get to a place of shared clarity. So, if you're as a leader sharing the facts of the situation and you've elicited your team member to also share their facts, are both of you clear on the other's perspective and on the relatively objective facts of the situation? If not, you want to spend some time there getting clear, right? That didn't happen with my team member. They were very clear about the issues, but hypothetically, they could have said, "Well, I don't understand what you mean. This document's not prepared properly. It looks properly prepared to me." And then in that instance, we would have had to go through an exchange to understand what I'm communicating and what they're communicating. And I have had that, by the way, where there were conflicting truths in an accountability conversation. That's probably a video for a different day. How you manage that conflict of facts and information. Now, once you kind of get clear on what happened and what was needed, and basically what should have been done that wasn't, you can move into expectations. So clarify, this is what my expectation was. This was our shared upon agreement. This was the responsibility that you had. And that expectation was not met, right? You didn't deliver what you said you would. So here are, as the leader, here are my expectations going forward. You, as the leader, get to set the board for how you move forward. And you can also ask your team member, is there anything that you want to add into how this work gets done moving forward, or even how we are interacting or speaking with one another? Right. So you set these shared expectations and then you come to an agreement. Can we agree that this is how we will do things moving forward so that the issues that we just hashed out don't happen again? So you want to have that part about expectations. So that's leading with a softened edge through accountability versus, again, my old way of the hard edge. And I'll share this screen in case it's helpful for you to see that soft method. I find, sometimes it's easier and helpful to see the visual of it. So I'll share this as a LinkedIn newsletter that I put out today. You can hopefully see this right here. So slow the surge. You want to orient to your leadership values. You want to find the facts and map the misalignment. And then you want to talk to transform, and you want to do it from the place of loving accountability with curiosity, getting clear with one another, and setting expectations. So that's soft method. In this LinkedIn newsletter, I've got some insights and some reflective questions that you can use too. Why accountability matters, particularly in the grand scheme of organizational culture, is that we know that there are 12 essential elements of great company culture. And our company has a toolkit that is called the Build a Great Company Guide. If you want to get that guide, you can click the link that's in my profile on LinkedIn. I believe it's also on YouTube, and you'll be able to get that guide. Now, communication is one of the 12 essential elements of great company culture. We got to have clear, transparent, inclusive communication. Fair is another descriptor for that. But what we also have to have for a great company culture is psychological safety. If I would have shown up to that meeting yelling, cussing, telling the person that they're a bad employee, that they are a major disappointment, that I don't know if I can work with them ever again, that is going to threaten psychological safety. Even if that's how you felt and that's your raw, true emotion, if you leash that out, that is going to strip your relationship of trust and psychological safety. And it is something that can take years to build and seconds to dismantle. So this is why, in the grand scheme of culture change, I'm often talking about conflict, or I'm talking about accountability, or I'm talking about leading from a place of fairness and equity, because it matters for the overall employee experience. So if you want that guide, go ahead and click the link. You can learn about the 12 elements and you'll get some tips about how you can utilize those tools. So now what I want to do, I want to take a look and I want to see if there's any comments. I think we might be good. But here's what I want to do. I want to go to some of these, let's call it case studies. So on a Facebook post, there were questions that people asked me, and they were so good. I said, I'm gonna, I had already recorded this soft method on Tuesday. And I thought, I would rather do it live, and do content that's specific to what people ask. So I'm just going to go down the line and read some of the questions that people shared and give you some insights. Okay. So here's what one person shared. Let's call her L. She said, "Thank you for sharing your story." They said that I ran into a similar issue recently on unmet needs, which actually resulted in accountability completely dismissed. It certainly had me implementing immediately process changes. So I asked a clarifying question, about whose unmet needs, and give a little context. And what Elle said was, it was my needs that didn't get met. She clearly communicated the need for a project. The teammate repeated back the need, and repeated back for clarity. So the team member confirmed their understanding of Elle's request. And then when the delivery came, she says, delivery was a complete opposite. I addressed it, but they took no accountability and saw no need to make it right either. My gasket wasn't blown then, but once they dismissed themselves from any accountability, it was pretty close. And then there was someone who added onto this. Let's call them R. R said, "This accountability piece is where I get tripped up. It's one thing if it's a one time mistake and they own it and take immediate accountability and implement behavior change. I found in this case, it's not often the case." So I'm going to pull up a whiteboard because I think it might be helpful to illustrate this point. I know I'm a visual learner. The fact that I can't access my mini whiteboard, it's really throwing me for a loop. But I still want to write this out because I think it matters. All right. So let's go to this first part. This leader says they had a assignment or deliverable to their team member. Team member said, "I get it." Delivery came, they didn't get it. And then when that person was basically told how they missed the mark, they essentially didn't care enough to figure out how to make it right. This is big because accountability does require, it's like a two-way street, or I don't know if that metaphor works, but it does require two people to be in a conversation with the end goal being shared understanding and behavior change. How will we do things differently next time? If you've got folks on your team and they have no interest in making amends and doing good work in making things right, that's a performance issue that really looks at their fit on the team, because it could be a values clash, really, as opposed to they had a differing opinion, right? At the end of the day, leaders have the responsibility to set the bar. And if folks don't want to meet the bar or they can't do it, it might be a mismatch situation. So, what I want to do, I'm going to share this screen because I do want to illustrate this point. I think it's such a good tool. There's a book called Traction. That's too far for me to reach, by Gino Wickman, and it's a book that is often used for small businesses, but I have found for large organizations and even corporations, this framework is very helpful. So let me share the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about, and I will write out what I want to share. All right, so hopefully y'all can see that. So in the book Traction, the author talks about a whole chapter on people. And I have found when I'm coaching managers, even if they work for corporate, I'm using these small business tools because I think there's a simplicity in it. So Gino talks about essentially the G, W, and the C. And essentially, when you are looking at the evaluation of a employee, whether it's because you're wanting to hire them, it's your 90-day introductory period, or just an annual check in. I think it's helpful to do this work to think about what are or how are my people. So, this is the first one. Hopefully, I'll make that a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay. So, this one is, do they get it? This is big. And I say that because we often do make leadership decisions from a place of our emotions. It's human. This invites you to ask this question of, does this person understand their role? Do they get it? When it comes to our work quality, do they get it? When it comes to my company values, do they get it? Or our team values, do they get it? When I've shared how they've made a mistake, do they get it? When I share how they've fallen short of our expectations and I'm asking them to do better, to meet our shared expectations, to follow through, do they get it? Now, there's two responses to this question. There is no middle ground. Either they do or they don't. So, do they get it? Cool. Do they not get it? It's a question for you. The next thing that I really appreciate out of this model in terms of get it, or sorry, the GWC, is, do they want it? Now, again, this is not verbatim from Traction. I'm applying Traction's GWC to this, case study, for any, Traction purists out there. So when it comes to want it, you really got to ask yourself, and you can even ask them, do you want to continue working on these projects, right? Do you want this job? Now that's very direct. So really when I say, do you want it? I start really soft-footed with it. I ask myself, do they seem to have a drive to improve and do better? Right? My company is a learning organization. We're a learning company. And I don't mean just because we do instructional design and leadership development and trainings. Yes, we do learning in that way. But we're also a learning organization in that we are always trying to learn, improve, and get better. And you can't get better unless you make mistakes. So, the beauty of having a culture of learning is that we build in space for mistake making, right? So if you make a mistake, you're not fired. If you fall short of our expectations, you're not fired. You should, though, find an opportunity to learn from the mistake so that you can continue to get better. That's training, right? Someone doesn't just wake up and run a marathon. They have to get up and first do that first mile and then the second mile. And they might fall, they might have poor form, they might get a backache, they might get shin splints. They're going to make mistakes along the way until they become someone that can run and complete a marathon, right? But they get up every time, even with the shin splints, and the sore feet and the peeled off toenail. I'm talking about a friend of mine, by the way. I'm thinking about their marathon training. They do all of that because they want it. They want to get better. The work, the task, and the job of being a marathoner is touching on a sense of purpose and meaning. So you got to ask yourself, does this person want it? Do they want to be on this team? Do they want to get better? And in the case study of the person in this chat, I wonder if they do want it. Because if they did, my sense would be that they would want to make it right. And the original commenter said they don't want to get it right. All right. So that's the second kind of a test. Do they want it or do they not want it? And I probably should have made that green. All right. So now that we've got this, it's time to talk about the next kind of category in this framework, which is capacity. So, one of the things I often talk to my clients about is that we've got to eliminate the belief that people have to be perfect and get it perfect all the time. We do want qualified people, we want competent people, we want people who care, but also, are they trainable? I have had team members, including this one, who came to the job with lots of skill, lots of knowledge and ability. And there were some areas where they fell short. But did they have the actual capacity to grow and get better with an investment of training and coaching? The answer was yes. So you've got to ask yourself for your accountability conversations. If they don't go the way that you want, if the person is not willing to be held accountable, is do they have the capacity to get better? Right. And that goes to the next kind of the previous step. Do they want it? Because I'm going to tell you, the answer might be no, they don't want it and they don't care. So again, I'm not making hiring prescriptions for anyone who commented, but when I look at the case study, they got an assignment, they repeated back that they understood the assignment, the delivery was crap, they didn't take accountability, and they saw no need to make it right. So they did get it. All right. They did get it. I'll use a different color. All right. That's not a different color. Hold on one second. All right. So they did get it. So that's good. It doesn't seem like they want it. They don't want to get better. They don't want to assuage their supervisor. They don't want to be a better team player. They don't want to improve. So looks like this is where they are on this one. And in terms of capacity, that's a question I don't know. Do they have the ability to grow and get better? But if you are doing a GWC and you find, you know what, this person doesn't want it and they don't have capacity, and even though they got it, they kind of didn't care. That's a triple X, right? That might be a conversation to talk about whether or not they're the right fit for your organization or your team. And then you can get into a conversation and be very transparent about it. So I think this connects to a comment that somebody else made, which is, at what point do you let people know that this is the performance that I expect? And if you don't perform, you don't contribute in the way that I want, we might have to have a different conversation that's about termination. That can feel very scary. I know that we've talked to so many leaders over the years who are nervous to engage in those conversations. They don't want to have a conversation about how to lead or, how to hold people accountable where people might actually be invited out of their job. But that is a really important part of leadership, to communicate it and to communicate it in a way that's not, I don't like you, you're not a culture fit, you're a bad person, you don't belong on this team. Right? That's coming from that personal place of the telling of the story. Instead, you got facts. I shared kind of what we needed, and you didn't follow through. You don't seem to care or want to get better based on the opportunity to create solutions to make it right. And I've offered training and I'm not seeing improvement with the training. And so I want to give us a 30-day plan to see how we can and how you can develop in the areas where I need you to, or we're going to have a conversation about your tenure on the team, and doing that in a way that people understand the gravity, right? You don't want to make it right. You don't care about quality. You're here to do a job. And if you can't do that job, then we're going to have to find somebody who can. That's hard for some people, but that's what it means to be a people leader, to really show clarity and direction. Okay, let's go back to the notes. All right, rather the comments. Okay, here's what somebody, let's call them A. This is what they said. This is so good. I would love for you to share perspective, the ratio of moments like this compared to being a superstar employee. Because in those moments of angst, we tend to only count the bad, which results in possibly losing a good employee who dropped the ball. That leads to a loss in productivity for the team and trying to retrain someone instead of carving out the space to correct in the moment. And so I asked a clarifying question. I said, when you talk about point to the ratio of moments, is what you mean that we balance, here are the moments that you've done really well, and we balance that with the moment where they messed up? And they said, yes, this is exactly right. So they offered this last point. They said accountability is huge. Many employers don't want to do that work. They only want to hold the employee accountable and not themselves, and wonder why turnover is high. When people know you don't care, they definitely don't care. So let me bring it back to this moment. Y'all, I cannot express how frustrated, right, that I was going into my Talk to Transform accountability conversation. And here's the thing, I know that my employee is a hard worker. I know that they deeply care about doing good for the company and doing good for our clients. I also know that they are, let's say, an empath, so they're energetically sensitive, and so if I come in guns blazing, that's going to not only dysregulate them but shut them down. And if I come in guns blazing with, here are all the ways that you messed up, it doesn't honor all of the ways that they've done such incredible work on this project and others. I mean, the way that they've innovated, the way that they've added new systems that we didn't have at the company, the way that they are so enthusiastic because they get it and they want it, right? And they have capacity. So I had to, again, orient to my values, soften up, and come into the conversation, and not in that old tired feedback sandwich that everybody can see through. Feedback sandwich is good, all the bad you've done, and then one like teensy little good comment on the bottom to try to make it easier to swallow the criticism or feedback. I don't do that. But what I did do is I started out by saying, first, this was a beast. This project was a beast, and own that it was hard on me too. I said, there's so much in this package that I've not ever had to do. So I want to honor if you felt overwhelmed and you've never seen this amount of, stuff we have to put together. It's because it's rare. So it's not just you, it's rare. And then I said, I want to thank you for all that you have done. And I listed, again, not like you did such a great job, these empty platitudes. I gave facts. I appreciated how you created this system. I love your great communication with our other team member to keep things on track. I appreciate the high quality of writing that you've done, right? I gave very specific points of feedback that was positive and true. And then this is that ratio. Then I told them, I said, and given all the good, there was a lot of challenges that happened. And I said, it can't happen again. Right. And this is where it's okay for you to share your emotions as a leader, but do it in a mindful way. So I said, the last 9 hours were so incredibly stressful for me. I'm like, my biometrics, right? My biometrics are showing like how stressed out I was. And I said, I'm sure that you were stressed out too. And they nodded, yes, I was. I said, I don't ever want to be at the wire like this. And I don't want to feel stressed out. I don't want the quality of the work that we put together to be poor. And I want us to have a spaciousness so that we can double and triple check and feel proud of what we deliver. And we weren't able to do that fully this time. And then I said, here's what I observed. This is the facts, right? I observed this, 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 and this. What was your experience with that? Did you see or experience those same things? Right. And these were the challenges where she fell short of our expectations. And she said, yeah, that's true. And we talked about that. And then once we got clear what happened and what we need, I wanted to leave that conversation with some commitments, right? What will we do? We have another one of these due. It won't be as hard, in like 2 weeks. So, what are we going to do today and tomorrow and the rest of this week to make sure that we don't replicate this really um, it's not a best practice, this like a poor practice of how some of this stuff went down. And then she said, I think I could do this, I could do this. And then I ate what was mine to eat. I said, you know what? That one's not yours. I didn't give you clarity. And so I can't hold you accountable to the thing that you didn't do. And so I appreciate A's comment because I think that in accountability, we do have to balance because otherwise it comes across that this is a bad employee that always makes mistakes and never does anything right. And sometimes this is a snapshot, it's a moment in time. And we can correct for that moment, but not act like that's the whole identity of the person. The other thing that I want to say, and I learned this from uh, when I first started consulting, this maybe was 2009. I was working with an agency in DC, and I'm going to give him his credit, his flowers, Bill Shepherdson. We were talking about accountability then, and he gave me this metaphor. He said, "We don't want to move to snap judgment, right? That's like you make a quick judgment. You saw something, they're bad. The document was missing, they're a poor worker, right? We make these snap judgments." He said, "We should take snapshots." So this thing happened right here, this objective thing, snapshot. I'm adding this. Then I put it in my photo album, close it, and put it on the shelf. And when they do something good, I take a snapshot and put it in that photo album. And that way I'm having a balanced view when I open up that, photo album, that's very dated, but that photo album in 6 months, I can look at the snapshots and see on balance, they were way more high performer than one that had performance challenges, right? They did have these three snapshots of low or poor performance, but they have 10 snapshots of high and great performance where their values align, they're a collaborator, they're an amazing team player, they are a cheerleader for the team, all those pieces that matters. So do that, leaders. Do a snapshot of the good and the bad and the ugly, and then come back to the photo album to not dwell in that photo, that one snapshot. All right, let's see here. We've got a few more comments I want to make sure that I answer. Let's see here. Let's see here. All right. So this is what R says. Another comment says, "Great post. Thank you. I would love to hear more, especially around how this creates real accountability and ownership of mistakes and behavior change." So hopefully I touched on that. Or if I didn't, let me know. This is what they shared next. "One thing I struggle with is the idea, maybe in my own head, but I think also based on experiences of needing to give the same feedback repeatedly, that delivering things softly or gently can make people feel like it's not that serious. So, how do you deliver things softly or gently when you really need to say, if you do this again, it's grounds for getting fired?" Let's actually go there. I touched on this, but I want to dig into it. You can deliver feedback and you can hold people accountable in a way. I use the S.O.F.T method. That's our proprietary method. In a way that is softer than the harsh way you might want to deliver it, but even in a way that is emotionally intelligent and uses psychological safety language and conditions, you can still be very direct about where performance fell short, where mistakes were made, and the consequences of that. This is the thing that we often miss. We will tell someone how they messed up. So I can't, I was trying to think of a different example, but we can tell people how they've messed up. Well, we don't often communicate the impact of that mistake And we certainly don't communicate, well, what happens if they keep making the mistake? Was it a big deal or was it not? So I've had other team members where maybe they made a mistake and it was, an email didn't get filed properly. Okay. That's not the end of the world. However, I need to make sure important emails don't go missing. And so I'll share the impact. This email got misfiled. It means I didn't get this information to this important partner and they didn't have a resource that they needed until the very last minute. So this misfiling impacted their ability to do what they had to do with the information that they requested of me. And then, so that's the impact. And then I can make the consequence. If you aren't able to manage the emails and the communication in a way that don't disrupt our clients getting what they need or me getting information, then I can't have you manage the inbox because I need to trust that it's getting managed 100%. Like it's being managed really well and people are getting what they need. And this is not a fireable offense. So that's not this part. But I've also had conversations with folks to say, look, um, that one I cannot share. But what I can say is I've had conversations with the people and I've let them know, look, this is a pattern, not a one-time thing. This happened this month and this month. It happened this week. We have a pattern of this performance and you're not making the changes that you committed to making. And then it might be, I'm gonna, give you a 30-day or 60-day PIP, a performance improvement plan. And here's what I need to see: measurable change in areas 1, 2, and 3. And if you aren't able to show growth in these areas, we're gonna have a conversation about your tenure at the company, right? Because this has to be done, especially for my clients that have, government contracts and compliance. You can't be messing around. You don't do certain stuff, you're gonna get grants pulled, you're gonna get audited, you're gonna lose money and not get it again. I mean, these are important things that we have to be paying attention to. And to let people know that their behavior and their actions and their performance does not exist in a bubble. It can have impact on other team members or your clients or your funding. So that's what I would say to that point. You can communicate in a way that's not raised voice and shouting or strong words, and still communicate in a way. This is what happened. This is what we need. If there aren't changes, then we're going to have to examine your ability to save the company. Right? Okay. This is another question that are raised. This is the question. Another thought or curiosity I have is that I do think it's appropriate for a leader to appropriately express frustration or anger when the situation calls for it as part of honest and candid conversations. For example, I'm frustrated these balls were dropped on such an important project after we put so much effort into its success. And they said, I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Um, I 100% agree. Just because you are a manager and you manage other people doesn't mean that you don't get the human right to have emotions. But I think the key word that you said is that it's appropriate. So in my instance this week, where this whole thing is stemming from, I told my team member, I first want to acknowledge I'm frustrated at the situation. And I'm frustrated that things didn't go the way that I hoped. Right. So I expressed my emotions. And I did that for two reasons. One, because it's like, if you've ever watched, this is like a very strange reference, but just follow me if y'all follow me. If you've ever seen a horror movie, and particularly one that has like demons in it, like supernatural or something like that, you can't exorcise the demon unless you name it. It's like a real thing. Like you have to know its name so that you can vanquish it. I feel like it's the same thing when I'm trying to have an emotionally intelligent, regulated conversation with someone. If I am trying to talk to somebody, but my emotions are sitting right here, my anger, my frustration, my disappointment, um, my anger, my overinflated perfectionist part is sitting right here. it's going to color my tone. It's going to shape my words. It's going to bust out even when I'm trying to suppress it. So if I just name it, hey, I'm frustrated. I feel a lightness that comes in my chest every time I speak the name of the feelings that I have, right? Because that's mine. I own that. That's inside me. And that person should know how all of this has impacted you. But if you make space for your emotions, you got to make space for theirs. The other reason that I mention my emotions is because I'm not a perfect person. Yes, I train and coach. I'm doing this video, but I'm not 100% perfect all the time. And so I share what I'm feeling so that if I've got to, do a cleanup or something in the conversation or in the end, I can say, I'm going to pause. And I actually did this now that I think about it. As we were talking about what went wrong, there was something that the person said, and I felt getting triggered again. And so it happened so fast, like a chemical reaction of vinegar and baking soda, that I started a sentence with three words, and then I paused it and pulled it back, and I said, you know what? Let me read you. Let me start over. I said, that stress of what we just completed, I can feel it showing up in the words I'm using, and I don't want to communicate with you like that. And so let me start over. And so I always said, let me rewind. And so I rewound it and did it again. But because I started off the call talking about frustration, they shared their stress. We gave each other grace as well for what came up. So I don't think that you have to hide your emotions. I think you can name them, but that's different than saying, I don't like you right now because your performance, right? I'm really upset with you. I wouldn't frame it like that. Um, you can name that you're upset. You're upset with the behavior, with the choices that were made, but to not make it personal, to make the person feel the weight of your emotion and check out and not feel psychologically safe enough to participate. So that's my take on that. Um, let's see here. And I think the phrasing that you offered, I'm frustrated these balls were dropped. I think that is perfectly fine. And I might use that too. Okay. So I think I've hit all the comments. I'm just double checking the comments that folks asked live. And I think I hit on the comments that folks shared in the post itself. So here's the main thing I want to say. This went longer than I anticipated. So hopefully there's some good gems. I'll probably have my team cut it up into bite-sized pieces. But here's my takeaway. Oftentimes when organizations hire my team to do training and to do coaching, we often spend some time even talking about how do you define a leader. For me, a leader can be in any position at any part of the organizational level because we're all leading something, we all have influence on something. When I talk about people managers, I have a lot of emotion and deep care around people managers because many people, most of us, if I was to take a guess, we are put in positions to manage people because we are high performers. Being an individually high performer does not make you an exceptional people manager. That's just the truth. You probably hear my dog getting a sip of water. I think that managing people this is my language, it is a sacred role. And why I say it's a sacred role is because there's been so much data over the last couple of years that have talked about workplace well-being, mental health in the workplace. There he goes. And one of the things that we repeatedly see is that a leader can have more impact on an employee's mental health and sense of self than a romantic partner. There's a lot of weight. There is a lot of weight that comes from being a people manager. And I think we don't often give it the respect, we don't often give it the thoughtfulness and the care that that's required of it. It's a big deal. People's professional development and their sense of self, their purpose, how they live out that purpose, it can be shaped or destroyed by their individual manager. I know my own story about, leaving a dream job, which I ended up coming to create this firm, was created because I had a direct manager who did not offer me dignity and respect or care. And so when I talk about accountability and loving accountability and building shared expectations, all of it comes in this ecosystem of creating a workplace where we can all thrive. That's fair and equitable and inclusive and full of care and accountability and joy. And I don't think that that has to be rare. I just think we have to make an intention to build those kind of workplaces and then do it. So if you want to learn how you can help support building thriving, conflict resilient, high performing, but really joy filled company cultures, I want to invite you to download my guide, Build a Great Company Culture. I go over the 12 essential elements of great company culture, one of them being communication, and inspiring and equitable leadership is another one. So this is my soapbox. I will stay on this soapbox until I retire. I come from a line of caregivers, and I'm a second generation people and culture leader. And I hope, as part of my legacy, it is to truly transform the way in which we treat people and the way that we do great work, because how we do the work matters, how we treat people matters, how we build the habit and the practice to being of our word and holding ourselves and others accountable is such an important part of trust building and psychological safety, that I trust that you'll do what you said, and if you didn't, you'll make it right. And you, the same for me. You trust that I will do what I said, and if I don't, as the leader, y'all as a team will hold me accountable. Somebody will hold me accountable. So that's it, y'all. This is emotionally intelligent accountability. If you got a nugget from the session, please put a comment below. If there's a question that got sparked by this session and you want me to dig into it or answer your question or share a resource, put it in the comment below. My favorite thing to do as a generator is to respond to the needs and the questions of folks in the community. So feel free to bring it. And I look forward to sharing more of me and more of our incredible materials with y'all to help make work more human. So have a good time and good night, y'all.